On September 2nd, Pete Hegseth ordered that Navy SEAL Team 6 kill the survivors in one of the boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela. SEAL Team 6 fulfilled those orders and killed the individuals who survived. This was a clear example of a war crime. Washington Post got the scoop, and now it's increasingly clear why 4-star Admiral Alvin Halsey, who was the head of Southern Command, abruptly resigned from his position, a position that nobody resigns from before the end of your term. And he resigned back on October 16th of this past year. Now, these war crimes will likely be the subject of future war tribunals after this Trump regime is over. Let me just go and explain to you what went down as reported by the Washington Post. In their exclusive, they explained how the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, gave a spoken directive, according to 2 people with direct knowledge of the operation, to kill everybody in the strike on an alleged narco-trafficking vessel targeted on September 2nd in the Southern Caribbean. Following the initial strike reportedly carried out by U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6, a live drone feed showed that 2 of the 11 crew members on board the vessel had survived and were clinging to the burning wreck, leading the commander of the operation to order a second strike to comply with the instructions given by Hegseth. The order, essentially a directive to show no quarter, would be considered a war crime if proven to have been given by Hegseth. Admiral Frank M. Mitch Bradley, who at the time was the commander of Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, gave the order to carry out the second strike, telling others on a secure conference call that the survivors were still legitimate targets because they could theoretically call other traffickers to retrieve them and their cargo, with him having since been promoted to lead the U.S. Special Operations Southern Command. SOCOM. So he took the job of Admiral Halsey, who said, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. You take a look at this, it seems to be a clear-cut example of a war crime. Here's how one individual describes it, I think, succinctly. Whatever the legality of these overall strikes as a whole, this incident is very clearly a war crime, even if you accept that the individuals who were killed are combatants. I don't think we can even accept that. I think that we've heard stories that a lot of these people may be fishermen, low-level people who didn't know what's going on, and the gangs traffic people. How do we know that the people on these boats weren't being trafficked or who they are at all? But if you even just accept that they are enemy combatants, let's say, still a war crime. Specifically, under the 1949 Geneva Convention, Rule 47, attacking persons who are recognized as hors de combat is prohibited. A person is viewed as hors de combat if anyone who is defenseless because of unconsciousness, shipwreck, wounds, or sickness, provided he or she abstains from any hostile act and does not attempt to escape. This account explains, I expect that Hegseth and others involved will get a preemptive pardon from Trump eventually, but they might want to avoid traveling outside of America for the rest of their lives. It also explains why Alvin Halsey, the 4-star admiral, resigned so suddenly from Southcom, and why Trump has gone so bananas over reminders about not obeying illegal orders. Right? Trump, Hegseth, the whole regime are saying, that's sedition! How dare you say don't obey illegal orders? One thing that's pointed out here as well is that giving no quarter has been forbidden since at least 1899, well before the Geneva Conventions. Article 23 of the Hague Convention of 1907 states specifically that it is especially forbidden to declare that no quarter will be given, and Article 8.2 sub B11 and 8.2 E10 of the Rome Statute establishing the International Criminal Court declares that no quarter will be given is explicitly listed as a war crime in international and non-international armed conflicts. This isn't just theoretical. Those prosecuted for giving no quarter have included the SS men responsible for the 1944 Malmedy massacre of U.S. soldiers a German U-boat commander, a Japanese admiral overseeing the occupation of the Philippines, and Bosnian Serb war criminals. Given how the U.S. military works, there will be documentary evidence as well as witnesses to the orders given in this incident. They will certainly be available to the next U.S. administration and likely under subpoena by Congress. Legally perilous is an understatement. And then there's a case study that's given as an example where a Nazi U-boat commander and his subordinates were prosecuted and executed. They were given the death penalty for killing the survivors of a ship that he sank called the Peleus. Let's take a look at that example right here. The Peleus trial. And the individuals were executed today, many years ago. 3 days, exactly 80 years from today's date. The trial of the people of the U-boat captains at the Peleus trial. They were charged with committing a war crime and that in the Atlantic Ocean on the night of the 13th and 14th, March 1944, when captain and members of the crew of the U-boat 852, which sunk the steamship, the Peleus, in violation of the laws and usages of war, were concerned in the killing of members of the crew of the said steamship, Allied nationals, by firing and throwing grenades at them. The Peleus was a Greek ship chartered by the British Ministry of War Transport. The crew consisted of a variety of nationalities. On board, there were 18 Greeks, 8 British seamen, 1 seaman from Aden, 2 Egyptians, 3 Chinese, a Russian, a Chilean, and a Pole. On the 13th of March, 1944, the ship was sunk. It talked about how the crew of the Peleus were able to survive. The submarine then proceeded to open fire with a machine gun or machine guns on the survivors in the water and on the rafts, and also threw hand grenades on the survivors, with the result that all of the crew in the water were killed or died of their wounds except for 3. These men remained in the water and were eventually picked up by a Portuguese steamship. Now, here was their sentence. The Germans who were involved in doing this, Eck, Hoffmann, and Weissepang, were sentenced to suffer death by shooting. And then one other person was sentenced to imprisonment for life. And then Schwinder was sentenced to suffer imprisonment for 15 years right there. So we have that taking place. And to me, this explains the resignation of 4-star Admiral Alvin Hoseley. And the guy who took his job is the guy who basically ordered the shootings, the killing of these survivors off the coast of Venezuela to take place.
So I've got some big news. Today's climate update comes with a surprising twist, and honestly, it's kind of an encouraging one. Even though the Trump administration completely backtracked on global climate efforts ahead of the COP30 summit, American businesses are not following that lead. And in fact, they are doing the complete opposite. So Reuters reviewed the attendance lists and found that 60 representatives from Fortune 100 companies showed up in Belém, Brazil. That's more than last year's summit. And the companies aren't small players either. We're talking Microsoft, Google, General Motors, Citigroup, Occidental Petroleum. Even Exxon CEO Darren Woods was at the pre-COP events. So the Trump administration is more extreme than Exxon. Let that sink in for a second. And why are they showing up? Well, executives say the answer is simple. Climate action is good business. Extreme weather is hammering supply chains and profits, and companies are realizing that they can't afford to sit on the sidelines. PepsiCo's chief sustainability officer said it bluntly, said, quote, "We need farmers to keep farming. Their entire business depends on this." Meanwhile, climate job growth is exploding. Former EPA chief Gina McCarthy noted that clean energy jobs grew 3 times faster than the rest of the U.S. workforce last year. And companies pushing clean energy and carbon markets say that these global conferences are where real partnerships happen. So the big picture, even with Trump calling climate change a hoax, businesses, cities, and non-federal leaders are stepping in and stepping up. Analysts say that existing policies from these groups are already driving major emissions cuts with or without the federal government, and that's why experts argue that U.S. companies still have a, quote, decisive role. Their presence signals to investors and global partners that the world's largest economy understands what's at stake: innovation, security, competitiveness, and keeping supply chains alive. In short, Washington may be wobbling on climate, but American businesses are not, and that matters just as much. Now, it's time for all of us to make noise, so let me know what you think about this in the comments below. below, whether it's your thoughts on this news, the climate in general, or on these ongoing climate updates that we're bringing you here at the MeidasTouch Network. Keep spreading the word. Ben, back to you.
But something else is going on here. So on President Trump's orders, we see the U.S. military blowing up alleged drug smugglers. You want to believe that. I mean, the fact that they're alleged drug smugglers, just assume they are for the sake of argument. These would then be men who rank near the bottom of a cartel's hierarchy, as Yashar Ali explains, and potentially exposing the United States to significant legal liability due to the possibility of killing innocent people. Meanwhile, Trump has been promising on Friday to pardon a man who used the power of the presidency of Honduras to shield those at the top of the cartel hierarchy from accountability. So Donald Trump posted on Friday that he would be pardoning the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is currently serving a 45-year sentence in U.S. federal prison for, among other things, participating in and profiting from a drug trafficking conspiracy that moved more than 400 tons of cocaine into the United States, a street value of tens of billions of dollars. As president, Hernandez took a country that already had deep narco-state characteristics and further centralized and institutionalized a narco-state model in Honduras. Federal prosecutors in the United States in his trial when he was extradited here showed that he took millions in bribes from cocaine traffickers, including money linked to El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel, and used the power of his office to protect traffickers and manipulate the police and military operations. He did this in concert with his brother, Tony Hernandez, who is currently serving a life sentence as well in federal prison, as part of what U.S. authorities described as a violent, state-sponsored drug trafficking conspiracy. And this is part of Donald Trump's plan to interfere in the elections in Honduras. Donald Trump wants his preferred candidate, Tito Asfura, to win. And then Donald Trump says that he will then, he goes, in addition to saying vote Asfura, because if you don't vote Asfura, the U.S. will not help Honduras ever. And he goes, additionally, I will be granting a full and complete pardon to former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who has been, according to many people that I greatly respect, treated very harshly and unfairly. This cannot be allowed to happen, especially now, after Tito Asfura wins in the election, when Honduras will be on its way to great political and financial success. So here Donald Trump is actually giving quarter right now to the head of the cartels, basically, the former president of Honduras, who was responsible for helping Chapo and help bring tens of billions or even potentially hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cocaine and serious drugs into the United States. And Trump wants to undermine Xiomara Castro, who's the current leader of Honduras. And Xiomara Castro's successor is running against Tito Asfura. And so this is how Trump wants to help the drug cartels against the people who have brought down the drugs in Honduras, because Trump has no goal of actually getting rid of the drugs. Trump wants to control it, basically, the way it goes down. I don't know how else you could interpret what he wants to do in issuing that pardon to one of the biggest drug traffickers there are out there. Like, would it shock you if in the future he goes, I'm going to pardon El Chapo, right? I mean, that's how corrupt the guy is. I want to bring this up as well, because we're hearing from Sarah Beckstrom's ex-boyfriend. And Sarah Beckstrom is the National Guards woman who tragically passed away. She was killed in Washington, D.C. Sarah Beckstrom's ex-boyfriend told NBC News she dreamed of becoming an FBI agent. She did not want to deploy to D.C. She hated it. She cried about it. But she started visiting monuments and museums and started enjoying it. May she rest in peace. And her ex-boyfriend told that to her ex-boyfriend told that to NBC News right there. So we'll keep you posted every step of the way, but this is what the Trump regime's doing. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.